All right, follow along in part two of the two-door tube car. Today we're taking from the basic belly structure, building out the rest of the floor and the boat side essentially, and then we're going to go up to the door bar, harness bar area, and support tubes. It's very difficult to get this floor rectangle oriented with the belly rectangle, but after some trial and error and marking center line, so I marked center line here, center line there. Here we go, kind of a line up. Center line on both sides there, and the front there. So basically marked center line on everything, and then measured the distance off. So I think we're gonna be pretty well on. First tube here, this is the first belly center tube. Tacked there, and basically I've made the same tube, and then I fit it on both sides to figure out, you know, if it's too long here or too short over here, then obviously that means you got a little bit of tweaking to do. But just a lot of fiddling with it. So I'll now make the second tube there, just notching with an angle grinder here. These ones, because you're taking 1 3/4 tube and going to a 2-inch tube, you can't just put a flat end on it because it'll stick out on either end. So it's actually got just a little bit of cope there to catch the radius of that square tube. So if you built this out of a bigger rec tube, you could avoid that, but it's just fine. Another few hours, metal shavings, dust everywhere, 1 million cuts, 2 cutoff wheels, 2 flap wheels. Let's see what progress looks like. Going around with getting these things square and centered on top of each other, but I'm happy with it now. And I started with the middle legs on both sides. Then I worked those rear corners and just finished the front here. But let me show you the rear corners, especially fun. So basically down here, it's pretty easy once you figure out the angle. You know, this one is, I forget off the top of my head, but it's about 40 degrees. But in here, I wanted it to capture this tube and this tube. So had to cope, quite literally what looks like a fish mouth, to get up into there, around the round tube, and then fit on the flat rectangle tubing. So or square tube. Whatever idea I had about square tube being easier, terrible advice. Square tube not easier to work with, but that's all right, making progress. Playing with the tube notcher. Just something to keep in mind, some little tips and tricks here. If you can cut the tube at an angle close to what the notch is going to be, you end up with a lot less meat here that you have to end up cutting out or removing. Otherwise, it clogs up the hole saw. Basically, the hole saw can't push all the way through. Now I'll go with a flap wheel and I'll just knock these edges down, put a little cope on it, and then we'll check the measurement for the other side. All right, Saturday, February 21st. Goals for the day are to finish out the belly section of the car. Some of the cross tubes and things, that'll come later when the drivetrain goes in, but I want to get all the webbing in to finish that out, and then start working on the door/shoulder bar section. So I'm going to try and set up a time lapse here to give you an idea how long I spent on each one of these tubes just in the floor section, and then we'll see where to go from there. Belly section is done for now. Pretty happy with how it came out. Again, we're about, I don't really need to go through the dimensions here, but the bottom rectangle is 1 3/4 quarter wall. This is 2-inch 120 wall. This is 2-inch 188 wall. And all the support tubes are 1 3/4 120 wall. All of it DOM, besides the rec tube, of course. But I went ahead and welded some of it, which is kind of risky in case, you know, I've messed up some critical dimension, but also I need to be able to move this thing around and build off of it, and not have it tweaking or cracking loose. All right, so we're using 2-inch tube. This is gonna be the door bar. I wanted to put a kick in it just to bring that door height down a little bit and add a little bit of style. Basically just kind of a trick here. So swap the hole saw over to 2-inch because the crossbar is going to be 2-inch. This will be notched. Could have pre-notched this when the tube was straight. But what I did instead is basically I loosened the vise here and then carefully juggled this whole thing, clamped the tube in so that it would be straight in the notcher, then tightened the vise once that end of the tube was on the ground. So it's no longer flat, perfectly flat, but the tube's not cockeyed in the notcher, which is most important. All right, this is my Woodward Fab tube bender with a 2-inch die. This bender's a little bit cheesy. Something like the JD Squared has 2 of these because when you bend, the tube has spring back. So the second one lets you catch the spring where it's at and then just progress. This one you have to slack and reload it a whole bunch of times, but it's okay, it does the trick. I don't think it would bend anything quarter wall, but so far it's just fine. Now the degree wheel, pretty cheesy the way they mounted it because it can get caught by the pin, which is what happened to mine immediately. But for a job like this, I don't care what the degree is. I'm just counting the actual notches. So I know for my first bend, I notched to this point. So that's what I'm gonna do again, and that means my bends will match. But something to keep in mind when bending tube is which way it's gonna pull. So I measured 12 inches from the end of here and put a Sharpie mark, can't see it right now, but I'm gonna line that up with the front of the die here. That way I know my bend is pulling away from that 12 inches and I'll have 12 inches straight of tube here at the end where I'll notch this in and should be able to overlay it on the other door tube and make them identical. All right, so the longer the tube is, the more leverage it has, the harder it is to get everything positioned. But basically here I can just pivot up and make this a little easier to work with. Find my Sharpie mark, pull this, yep. That's gonna be right where I need it to be. And then I made a big, long, way longer handle than what came with this bender, and that makes this a lot better. You know, our powered tube bender's cool, yes. Do I need it? No. And I put a whole bunch of WD-40 all over the tube. That makes it pull through the dies easier and keeps the tube from getting scratched or galled by the die. All right, this is our final one. So now, should be able to pull this right out, and we have our bend. All right, so here's how I'm making the two bars identical. So I line my bend up to where they're right on, and then the second notch, I just kind of snuck up on it until it was right on where the other one needs to be. Camera's hard to capture it, but over here is the easy part. I'll just Sharpie mark that, lop that off. All right, so after some thinking, I figured out a good way to do this to get these bars at an even height and notched on the tube. So first, I cut this cross tube a 1/2 inch longer than it needs to be. So I was able to mark a 1/4 inch in on either side. And the paint marker's big, so I marked center line and then I used the tube to split the Sharpie mark, basically. Used a speed square to help get these right angled and just gave them each 2 tacks, which I'm hoping is just barely enough to hold them while I work on the back tube. So once I notch this tube, I'll verify that my notch is the exact width that it needs to be, and then I should be able to pull these tubes together, tack one side, and then do some diagonal squaring. But I'm aiming for 60 inches, basically from the outside of the hoop to the outside here. So that's how long I want to make it. And because it's on the table, I can measure straight from the end of the round tube with my tape to the end of where the notch tube is going to be. And these guys are a little bit longer than they should need to be. So once I put my cross tube in, I'll leave them until I build the rest of the car because they might end up getting cut at an angle or capped and then tied into some tubes going rearward, not sure yet. And then up here, similar story. Those will get capped, cut down a little bit, maybe at a little bit of an angle, and then capped. All right, here we go. Vision's coming together. So tape's hooked on the outside of that front tube. Let's pretend that's the dash bar. And I can now come here and line this tube at 60 inches. Stop using my phone as a hammer. Right about there. So I'll tack one side. The other side's also at 60 inches. but I'll tack the one side, then figure out how to do some diagonal measuring taping. Make sure this thing's relatively square beyond just using my right angle squares. All right, so after quite a bit of adjusting tacks and ratchet strapping and getting this top section square, and again, my dash bar and my harness bar are 60 inches apart, which is what I wanted. My door bars obviously are a little bit longer than that since I put a bend in them, but I think that all measured out fine. So now I spun the belly slash floor, aimed it so the front of the car is that way. I cut the brace out there because we're going to be adding legs from here to here, theoretically. Now, in my drawings, I had that I wanted 10 inches of sweep, basically from, don't mind the extension cord, basically from, this is the bottom of the cage, bottom of the B-pillar. I wanted it to sweep 10 inches up to here because that follows basically the reclining angle of the seats. The 60 inches is 2 inches longer than the 58-inch floor. So this tube will come back as well to catch that, but it'll be a little bit less of an angle. I think the dissimilar angles help you keep the chassis from wanting to just go like that, or it just looks cool. I'm not sure. So I'm going to double check everything. I really want to make sure that that sweep, you know, that 10 inches back is what I really need. Right now, I've got a floor jack over there off of the chassis table, and this is just a clamped piece of 2x3 with a piece of wood on it. So incredibly sketchy, but as I start fitting legs, I'm hoping I can get that all to just dangle there well enough. And then once I can get one leg, two leg, it'll all start to get a lot less sketchy, but gonna go double check. All right, I went out to my Jeep and verified how much sweep I would want from the lower B-pillar to the upper. And it's true that the passenger side of the Jeep, 10 inches is the right sweep, but I remember that that seat's reclined a little more than I would like. So I bumped this up to where it's going to be right around 9 inches of sweep. And I think that'll better mirror the seat angles that I actually want to run. Now, the separation between the lower and the harness bar, basically I'm targeting a height of a little less than 24 inches. Right now, the seat bolt, basically the seat mounting flange on the bottom to the slot where the harnesses come out is 24 inches. Now they say you want that bar 1 to 3 inches below that height. So at 22, I'll be 2 inches below the harness bar height, and I think that'll be real good. And if the seat ends up mounting a little higher or lower, depending on the recliner, I think we should be right in the zone. So just dialing in my front to back here and my height. Now, of course, the car's shifting a little bit sideways as it's on a center pivoting jack stand, but when I make the tubes, I'll make them identical or mirrors of each other. So that they'll get the height on that just right. Right now I'm going to go up to the front and get that height to match because these two bars are going to be essentially parallel or the same height, so they'll be level. So just lots of fiddling here, and then we'll start cutting. Using this angle finder a little bit. Basically what I did is set it at 90 and then zeroed it because anything over 90 is not relevant for my notcher. And then if you aim it up towards that tube, it's going to give me a real good place to start with the notcher. So that's obviously 21.4, but I think I want a little more. So that's looking to me, obviously I'm not very good on the camera here, but I think somewhere around 23 degrees or so. The notcher's not ultra mega precise, but that's going to get me a nice place to start that tube to notch up here. And then the cut down here is when this rec tube's finally going to start being helpful. Because it's basically going to be, I can set that notch, have the tube a little bit long, and then just draw a Sharpie line across the plane of that square tube and chop it. So far so good on the Summit notcher here. So I just set it right at 24-ish degrees. I'll measure my length and stick a tube in there and see where it gets. All right, first tube, come around, coped there, and then you do it to where it fits around that tube. So now, my goal is to only attach the legs at the bottom so that I could lift the whole top off if I feel the need to, which I will when I do the down bars back here, because I want them to butt up against each other. And if you do that, there's no way to get them in. So if I can get these 4 tubes coped and strong enough to hold the whole thing to where I can lift it up, slot these down bars in. So trying to think ahead, order of operations. All right, 4 tubes are made. Ratchet straps are helping me hold everything a little bit. This gap closes when you push the tube into it. But anyway, I did not weld any of these top ones because I want to get those diagonals in. So I'm going to start working on those now. This morning at 7 a.m. We're about 2:30 right now. We've got the down bars done, and I welded all 4 corners now. So the top is attached. Sorry, my hand's shaking, doing a lot of grinding. But gonna start working on some of the door tie-in tubes here. But the rinse and repeat part of this. Basically the process is I make my notch angle there, and then once I get the notch to where I think it fits good, I swing it down to where, you know, there's a little bit length, a little bit extra length. Sharpie mark the plane of the square tube and chop it. And then, you know, just a little grinder fine tuning. So I'll match that tube over there and we'll keep on rolling. All right, pretty good work. Pretty happy with it. So this tube coming down, strengthening the A-pillar. This one comes down, ties to the skid plate. Well, you know, the belly. And then belly here to stop the whole chassis from wanting to lay back. Welded little bits here and there. This arm bar section is 1 inch narrower than the floor. It tapers in just a little bit, and then the roof will taper in quite a bit. You can see those bars there. Basically, this is 1 3/4 120 wall, and this one's 090. I'm just trying to pepper in 090 where I can to shave some weight. And because this has a short span, and this tube's right here, I don't anticipate this getting hit by rocks very often. But back here, this stuff could get laid into a ledge and is a little more important to the roll cage, so I went thicker there. Look over here, coming along.